straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily.
Officer Potter's behavior would indicate that the reasonable officer in her position would not have perceived that deadly force had been justified.
Continued arguments over police use of force in Minnesota versus Kim Potter. Plus, more news out of Minnesota.
The one thing that I can say is the possibility of him getting more time and having to serve more time, that's a good thing.
A change of plea from ex-cop Derek Chauvin and former White House official Mark Meadows in hot water over the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Will he face criminal charges? Plus, former Governor Andrew Cuomo ordered to forfeit millions of dollars earned from his COVID-19 book deal. And he doesn't have much time to comply. Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. Wednesday marks day 6 in the trial of ex-Minnesota cop Kim Potter. At the center of the questioning, Potter's claim that she accidentally pulled her gun instead of her taser when she shot Daunte Wright during a traffic stop this past April. Wednesday started with the defense cross-examining taser trainer Sergeant Michael Peterson. This as there's been arguments over whether her actions were actually justified.
Where the suspect has a bench warrant for a gun charge, they should make an arrest.
Yes.
They can't let him go.
No.
You also teach that when a gun is involved on a bench warrant, that the officer should be vigilant about another gun being in the car at issue.
Absolutely.
Or a gun being on the person. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you train this over and over again, right?
Yes.
Because stopping someone in a car is one of the most dangerous things you can do.
Yes.
And police officers who aren't vigilant and are not aware of the dangers can be shot.
Yes.
Have been.
Yes.
In Tuesday's redirect examination, prosecutors pressed Peterson on his experience training officers.
Sergeant Peterson, in all the years that you've been working at the Brooklyn Center Police Department, have you been aware of any other officers who have drawn their handgun when they meant to draw their taser?
I don't.
And in the scenario-based training, has that ever happened?
It's not a topic that I frequently think about. I would have to take a considerable amount of time to think about that.
Yeah, I guess I'm just asking if somebody has ever said to you, that's not what I meant to do.
I have conducted so many trainings, run so many trainings that they honestly all blur together. I couldn't pick out a specific time.
Potter faces manslaughter charges after the shooting death of Wright in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. Officers say Wright was pulled over for an expired registration tag. At the time, Wright called his mother and told her he was being pulled over for an air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. The whole incident was caught on video on several officers' body cams. That footage shows Wright getting in a scuffle with the officers as they tried to arrest him, after they determined he had a warrant out for his arrest. Then, as Wright gets back into his car, appearing to try and get away, Potter shoots him in the chest. He died as a result of those injuries. Potter maintains she pulled her handgun accidentally instead of her taser. There's a debate over whether that action was actually justified per the department's policies. A familiar face from the Derek Chauvin trial also took the stand Wednesday. Prosecutors asked law and police policy professor Seth Stoughton about Potter's use of force and whether it was appropriate at the time.
And in your review of all the materials in this case, did you see any evidence that Officer Potter decided to use a gun in this case instead of a taser?
Did I see evidence that she decided to use a gun? I think the evidence that I've reviewed suggested that she intended to use the taser and not the firearm. The use of deadly force was not appropriate, and the evidence suggests that a reasonable officer in Officer Potter's position could not have believed that it was proportional to the threat at the time. In other words, the use of force was apparently excessive and inappropriate.
Joining us today is civil rights attorneys Sue Ann Robinson and Terry Austin. Terry, most of the officers who testified were reluctant to say anything negative about Potter's actions. Do you think Professor Stoughton helped the prosecution today?
He absolutely did. There's no question the prosecution had a very difficult time with all of the police officers who testified. They were reluctant, they were hesitant. It was like you were pulling teeth from them. The last thing they wanted to do was to hurt Officer Potter, so they were being very calculated. Finally, when Stoughton got on the stand, he was able to say that the use of force here by Officer Potter was inappropriate and it was not reasonable. That's the first time that I think the prosecution has gotten that out in such clear terms.
No, Sue Ann, I can't say in the end because some of the testimony is still playing out, but who did Professor Stoughton's testimony help the most? So, Terry, let's throw that question to you. At the end of the day, who do you think that testimony is helping the most?
I think there's no question here, again, Brian, that Stoughton is helping the prosecution and the defense. When he was being examined on cross-examination, Earl Gray was questioning him, and he was literally just attacking him, talking over him. And frankly, I don't think he made any points. If I'm sitting on that jury, I'm thinking to myself, Earl Gray, you are not being fair with this witness. You are not allowing him to answer the questions. And frankly, you are not getting any substantive information from him. So prosecution win for this one.
Yeah, maybe to your point, they can see the contrast between how the officers testified and how the use of force expert testified and how that played out overall. Thank you. In other news, a $380 million payout is on the way for survivors of Larry Nassar's decades of abuse. Our own Terry Austin sat down with Jamie White, an attorney that represents several of the girls and women affected. This week, survivors came to an agreement with USA Gymnastics and the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. This comes after Nassar's reign of abuse as the former U.S. national gymnastics team doctor spanning over several decades. Nassar sexually abused more than 500 women and girls. Among the survivors, Olympic gold medalist Simone Biles, Michaela Maroney, and Allie Raceman. Attorney Jamie White tells our Terry Austin the settlement is a small step toward righting a big wrong.
This is the only way historically that institutions change. Whether it's the Catholic Church, whether it's the Boy Scouts, where we represent several hundred young men, or, you know, in this particular case, it's not until you hit people in their pocketbook that they understand you know, the importance of playing a role, especially when you are profiting off of the name and likeness of young people, right? So whether it's by choice or by force, I do think that we're going to see change. This is a message to institutions all over this country that, you know, if you're going to bring young people into your stead and you're going to profit off of them, whether it's in the context of a 12-year-old renting space in your gym, or whether it's Simone Biles and having her face on the front page to your benefit. If you do that, you have a responsibility. You cannot allow profits to overcome your responsibility.
Meanwhile, Nassar is serving a 60-year sentence of child pornography charges. He is also sentenced in a state case of 40 to 175 years behind bars. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, more misfortune for Mark Meadows as the former White House Chief of Staff faces possible criminal charges. But first, former Minneapolis police officer and convicted murderer Derek Chauvin changes his plea to guilty. Law and Crime's Angela Levy joins us with those details next.
Hi, this is Dan Abrams with exciting news for all of our Law and Crime followers on YouTube. You can now get the live Law and Crime Network with YouTubeTV for all of your daily live trial coverage, legal news, expert analysis, and original true crime programs. Subscribe to YouTubeTV today and then locate Law and Crime in the channel guide. And for only $1.99 a month, you can add the network to your bundle. Watch Law and Crime every day with YouTubeTV. We put you in the jury box.
Welcome back. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin pleads guilty in federal court in the death of George Floyd. Law and Crime's Angela Levy is here with the details of the plea.
Brian, Derek Chauvin pleaded guilty to violating the civil rights of George Floyd and to also violating the rights of a 14-year-old boy he arrested back in 2017. Now, this hearing took place in federal court, so cameras were not allowed, but a sketch artist captured some of it. Chauvin appeared in an orange prison jumpsuit next to his lawyer, Eric Nelson. Chauvin's family sat behind him, along with attorneys for the other 3 officers involved in Floyd's arrest and death in May of 2020. George Floyd's brothers were also in the courtroom. Now, in exchange for pleading guilty, Chauvin will be sentenced to between 20 and 25 years in prison. That sentence would run concurrently or at the same time as his 22.5-year state prison sentence. Chauvin will also serve his time in a federal prison, not a state prison. Floyd's family and their lawyers spoke after the hearing.
I mean, I'm still feeling the same pain, anger I felt in the beginning because he could have did this last year.
We came here just like we did before. We just wanted accountability because we can never have justice because we can never get George back.
He pleaded guilty today after putting this family through a gut-wrenching trial where the jury very quickly realized that he was guilty of all charges in one of the most catastrophic and egregious civil rights violations that anyone has ever seen.
Now, prosecutors plan to argue for a sentence of 300 months. That is 25 years. Now, had Chauvin gone to trial and been convicted, which appears to be very likely given the video evidence in this case, he would have faced the possibility of a life sentence. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. Let's bring back civil rights attorneys Sue Ann Robinson and Terry Austin. Terry, what sentence is Chauvin facing? We heard there that is a possible 25 years that he's found guilty of these 2 federal charges in 1 state. But is there a guideline or a range that he's looking at?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's looking at a range because he's going to be considering whether or not there are any other factors to put into that sentence. But they know that it's going to be at least 90% of what he needs to serve before he can even get out on probation. And, you know, frankly, I think the fact that he changed his plea from guilty to not guilty was really a good thing as far as the system was concerned. But he really didn't express any remorse, Brian. And I think that's the thing everyone was looking for. He answered all of the prosecution's questions about whether or not you held George Floyd down. Yes, you know, I did. And the fact that he violated his constitutional rights. But all in all, I don't think that society is basically satisfied with what he had to say during the change in that plea.
No, so, and he's been found guilty of state charges, pled guilty to federal. Where will Chauvin serve his time, and how does that work out?
He is going to serve his time in federal prison. It's going to be concurrent with his state sentence, and his federal sentence is actually about 2.5 years longer than his state sentence. So, you know, it's a win for him, I guess, in a way, because he's going to be in federal prison, which the perception is that he'll be safer because he wouldn't be with potentially people in state prison or state jail that he potentially put there. So he's safer in federal. I think he definitely overpromised and underperformed, because if you remember at the end of the state trial, when he was giving his statement, he told the family, you know, something will be revealed later that will help you to understand something, or some sort of cryptic thing he said. And, you know, there was nothing that happened today at the federal sentencing that revealed anything to any of us, other than that, you know, he took the plea and he's not going to waste the federal prosecutor's time.
Yeah, good point. We missed that little nugget that he promised us. And Janet, what about the other 3 officers facing charges, King, Lane, and Tao? What's next for them?
Well, their state trial is scheduled for March of 2022. We knew that had already been delayed, and a trial date in federal court has yet to be set. And Derek Chauvin will actually be formally sentenced at a later date. Brian?
Right. We'll see what that formal sentence ends up being and how many years or months, depending on how you break it down, it will be. O.J. Simpson is officially a free man as his parole ends in Nevada. The former football player, actor, and acquitted murderer was discharged from his parole 2 weeks ago because of good behavior. In 1997, Simpson was acquitted in the double murder of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ronald Goldman. It was called the trial of the century. He was later found liable for the deaths and ordered to pay more than $33 million to the victims' families. 74-year-old Simpson was released from a Nevada prison in October of 2017 after serving time on separate charges. Simpson was convicted by a Las Vegas jury after a confrontation with sports collectible dealers in a casino hotel in 2007. It escalated quickly and ultimately left Simpson and 5 other men facing robbery and kidnapping charges. Simpson maintains he just wanted personal items back, ones he says were taken from him after his acquittal of murder a decade earlier. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, the man who served under President Trump as the White House Chief of Staff is facing possible criminal charges stemming from the January 6th U.S. Capitol attack. Plus, more problems for another government official. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo ordered to pay back millions of dollars to the state of New York. Welcome back. Headed to Washington now, where former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is one step closer to facing criminal charges. This after a House vote late Tuesday night. U.S. representatives voted to approve the so-called January 6 committee's recommendation to hold Meadows in contempt of Congress for refusing to testify under a subpoena. This stems from the investigation into the January 6 attack when a mob stormed the U.S. Capitol following the 2020 election. On Monday, the committee released text messages sent to Meadows on January 6 from Fox News host and Donald Trump Jr., urging action from former President Trump. Meadows is the second official to face criminal contempt. Steve Bannon was previously indicted after failing to honor his subpoena in the investigation. It is now up to the Department of Justice to officially pursue criminal charges. Back to break down the latest in the January 6 committee is civil rights attorney Sue Ann Robinson and co-host Terry Austin. Terry Meadows, Mark Meadows has a second person to have these charges on him. Do you think there will be more in the future? And what kind of punishments could they face?
Oh, I definitely think there will be more in the future. I think Steve Bannon, you mentioned, was the first. Meadows is the second. Meadows is at least producing documents. He's refusing to show up. So there's no question that they were going to hold him in contempt here. And I think, as I said, you'll see others. He's facing a maximum of 12 months in prison and $100,000 and a minimum of 1 month. So we'll see what happens. All of this means, though, he does not still have to testify because they can't compel his testimony.
All right, so that's about testimony. Let's get to the facts. What do these text messages that have surfaced so far really tell us about the attack on the Capitol?
I think they tell us that there was a kind of like an underlying awareness with all of them that this was going to happen. I mean, obviously they had their blogs and their different sites that things were being coordinated and things like that, which has come out from the individual participants. But I think everyone was still thinking that it was a stretch to say that people were involved at the highest level, including Steve Bannon. And I think that's what the text messages are revealing, like what was going on, what they were thinking, what those sentiments were, what they were doing, what they were saying, and how they were aware that this was going to happen.
All right, let's continue to see how this committee uncovers more information and see if there will be more contempt of Congress charges. Thank you both. Up next, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo was ordered to return millions of dollars. This after allegedly using state resources to write a book about leading during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's coming up next on Law and Crime Daily. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. Turning now to news out of New York, as the state's former governor Andrew Cuomo is ordered to pay back a large sum of money he earned from his COVID-19 pandemic book deal. The amount, $5.1 million. He has just 30 days to return the money. A public ethics commission previously found Cuomo used state resources while writing his book, American Crisis Leadership, Lessons from the COVID-19 Pandemic. Cuomo's spokesperson maintains anyone who contributed volunteered to do so. This is the latest fall from grace in Cuomo's saga, as he now faces criminal charges for allegedly inappropriately touching a former assistant at the executive mansion while in office. And that came just months after resigning due to allegations of sexual harassment and other scandals. Sue-Ann, why can this ethics committee go after the money Cuomo made on his book deal?
Because they're essentially saying it was earned during his tenure and that he used material, obviously, from while he was serving to essentially profit from that. And so they're basically clawing that back. I think that, you know, the committee has just decided that obviously he's persona non grata based on what he's accused of doing. And they're just making sure that, you know, he is not profiting or benefiting from anything he did during that period of time when he was serving as governor.
Yeah, interesting, because it is a committee that I think he maybe have started and also like helped run while he was in office. Terry, Cuomo's likely going to fight this. What does that fight look like?
He is going to fight this hard, and Sue-Ann is right. They are coming after him in every direction. This is going to be a he said, she said. There are no videos. There's no witnesses here. So it's basically going to be an avalanche of evidence as far as emails are concerned, as far as texts are concerned. We know that the Attorney General has a lot of information in her report. So that will be something that I think he's going to have to deal with based on what we've heard so far. He's going to try to say his actions are innocent and unintentional, and he's going to argue that the accusers basically are either lying or they, you know, provided consent.
All right, we'll see how this plays out. Thank you both, and thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.